Hey you! Welcome back to this little corner of the internet where your day finally stops shouting at you. Tonight, you step into a soft, prehistoric Roman evening on a quiet hillside where the world is just wind, stone, and long rows of vines glimmering in fading light. A gentle breeze brushes your face, and for once, there is nothing urgent chasing you. Honestly, you probably won't survive this era in real life. No Wi-Fi, no painkillers, no iced coffee. But for now, you just get the cozy, cinematic version. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights, take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You arrive fully in the vineyard as the sun slides lower, turning everything a deeper shade of honey. Terraced rows step down the hillside, each low stone wall holding just enough soil to cradle a narrow line of vines. The leaves whisper quietly as the breeze moves through, their undersides flashing silver, like tiny fish turning in a river of air. The grapes hang heavy and dark, clustered like sleepy thoughts waiting to be picked. You stand on a narrow path worn smooth by years of bare feet and worn sandals. Under your soles, the ground feels warm from the day, radiating a steady, comforting heat. The soil is a mix of dust and pebbles, pale where it has dried, darker where water once passed. Someone has studied this slope carefully, coaxing tiny channels through the earth to guide rainwater, never wasting a drop. The land has been disciplined, but never bullied. You move without hurry. There is no supervisor watching a clock, no messages piling up. Your only task right now is to exist in this exact stretch of dusk as caretaker of vines you do not yet fully understand, but already feel strangely protective of. You reach out and run your fingertips along a vine's twisted trunk. It is rough and firm under the bark, a living line connecting soil to leaf to fruit, all in one simple upward gesture. The hillside around you hums softly with small lives. Crickets begin to tune their evening chorus. A bird calls once, then again, then settles. Somewhere behind you, out of sight, you sense low stone buildings, a farmhouse, a shed, the dark mouth of a cellar cut into the slope. The people who live and work here have already spent the day among these vines, hands sticky with sap, shoulders tired but practiced. They move through this place the way you move through your own room in the dark, by memory, not thought. You take a few steps further into the rows, letting the plants rise higher around you. On either side, the vines almost form a corridor, walls of living green that narrow your focus until it is just you, the path, and the sensation of leaves brushing occasionally against your arms. You can feel the temperature dropping slightly now. The heat of the day loosens its grip, and the breeze freshens, carrying the first hint of night's coolness down from the hilltop. You know somewhere in the back of your mind that the world beyond this valley is loud with politics and battles and restless ambition, but none of that reaches you here. Here, history shrinks down to something simple: whether the vines have enough water, whether the leaves are healthy, whether the grapes swell and darken as they should. It is strangely reassuring to remember that most of human history is not heroes and empires. It is small tasks repeated every day by people who just want the vines to do well. As the light thins, you feel your own thoughts thinning too, stretched out and softened. The to-do lists, the unfinished conversations, the tiny embarrassments replaying on loop in the back of your mind. They all feel strangely distant, as if they happened to someone else. The land does not care about any of it. The vines ask only that you show up, walk the rows, feel the breeze, and stay long enough to notice when something changes. You stand there a moment longer, breathing in the warm, earthy air, feeling the hillside under you like a slow, sleeping animal. In this first quiet evening, your new role settles gently around your shoulders. You are the one who tends this Roman vineyard, who listens to its creaks and whispers, who lets the wind carry away the weight of your day, so the night can grow calm and wide around you. You start to move, mostly because standing still invites thinking, and thinking invites stress. And you did not come to a Roman hillside to do more of that. Your feet drift along the worn path between the rows as if it has been quietly waiting all day for you. The slope curves gently beneath you, terraces catching the last light at different angles, some still glowing, others already folded into shadow, the world dimming with unhurried intention. You stop at the first vine and crouch. With the back of your hand, you brush aside a tuft of grass at its base, revealing cracked, pale soil. When you press your fingers deeper, you find cooler, slightly damp earth hidden just below. The vineyard keeps its comfort tucked under the surface, storing the memory of rain where only roots and patient hands will notice. A shallow water channel runs beside the row, a narrow groove cut along the contour of the hill. This is how water travels here, guided from a spring or a stone-lined pool higher up. You run your fingertips along the trench and feel the fine grit and tiny pebbles. Someone, long before you, walked this same line again and again, adjusting each bend until water obeyed, an ancient version of problem-solving done entirely in dust and silence. You rise and look at the vine itself. The leaves are broad and irregular, edges nibbled and frayed where wind and insects have left small signatures. You lift one so the low sun glows through it, revealing a lattice of veins like a delicate map. A dusting of soil clings underneath, and a tiny insect travels across it, unconcerned with your presence, perfectly content inside its leaf-sized universe. You move along the row, repeating a simple sequence. Feel the soil, lift a leaf, check the swelling grapes. It is not difficult work, but your body notices the steady pattern: bend, step, stretch, bend. It feels like a workout designed by someone who values joints and sanity. Slow, repetitive, oddly kind. The only soundtrack is the breeze rearranging the leaves and the faint tap of a pebble under your heel. Some vines have let their shoots wander into neighboring spaces, stretching out like overeager guests leaning into someone else's chair. On a low stone nearby, dry plant fibers lie coiled into short cords. You take one, loop it loosely around a stray shoot, and draw it back toward its wooden stake. There is no yanking, only suggestion. The plant is reminded that growing with a bit of support will make the weight of fruit easier later. The rhythm settles into you without asking. Inspect, adjust, step. Inspect, adjust, step. Your breathing slips into time with it. An easy inhale as you bend, a slow exhale as you straighten. You are not racing a clock or counting how many vines you have managed. Each tiny task is complete on its own, a bead on a string you are threading through the evening air. At the end of the row, you stand and stretch, letting your gaze travel outward. The vineyard spills around you in curved lines that follow the hill's natural shape, hugging its ribs and folds. Beyond the last terrace, the land drops toward a valley where other fields lie in muted colors. A pale road threads through them, a soft streak of dust hanging above it where a cart has passed. Beyond that, low hills blur into haze as the sky deepens toward blue-gray. The breeze cools as darkness edges closer, stroking the sweat at your neck and slipping beneath your clothes. It carries the scent of crushed green from the vines, the dry mineral tang of dust, and a faint trace of wood smoke from the farmhouse below. The air feels cleaner than the one you are used to, as if someone has turned down the volume on life by several notches. You notice how your shoulders have dropped, how your jaw has unclenched, without you giving it any conscious instruction. You turn into another row and notice how different it feels. Here, the soil is darker and slightly softer under your feet, holding more moisture. A few steps later, a higher row is more exposed, the wind pushing through more firmly, the ground a paler shade. You realize that tending this vineyard will never be about one rule applied everywhere, but about reading small differences and answering them with equally small, steady gestures. By the time you drift back toward the center of the hillside, your body has quietly aligned with the place. You have not fixed anything dramatic. You have simply walked, touched soil, and listened with your hands. The land will soon settle into night. The vines will keep growing in the dark without needing you to supervise. For now, it is enough that the rhythm of vines and earth has begun to overwrite the noise of your day, one calm step after another. Down on the lowest terrace, where the paths meet, you see a small cluster of figures gathered around a stone trough. Work is thinning but not finished. The last tasks of the day have shrunk down to washing dust from hands and settling tools into their resting places. Water gleams faintly in the fading light as arms dip in and out, droplets catching the breeze before they fall back into the basin. A slightly older figure stands a little apart, leaning on a smooth wooden staff. Their posture is relaxed but never careless, eyes drifting over the terraces as if they are reading the sloping lines of soil and vine like text on a page. This is the keeper of the vineyard, the one whose thoughts never fully leave the rows, even when the hands are still. When that gaze settles on you, it feels less like inspection and more like weather noticing a new cloud. They register the dust on your palms, the slight stiffness of shoulders that have already followed the curve of the hill, the way you stand just within the group instead of hovering far away. No words are needed. A tiny easing at the corners of the eyes is enough to tell you that, for now, you are counted among the helpers rather than the intruders. Around the trough, younger workers rinse their arms, watching thin streams of cloudy water swirl away before clearing again. Their voices stay naturally low, as if the vines have trained them not to shout. They trade brief notes about a stubborn patch of soil, a vine that surprised them with extra fruit, the relief of the late breeze that finally cooled their backs. You do not follow every detail, but you understand the rhythm of shared small complaints and quiet satisfaction at simply having made it through another hot day. On a flat stone, tools lie in a neat cluster, handles roughly parallel, iron blades turned away from where bare feet might wander, ropes coiled into compact circles instead of wild tangles. No chart hangs on a wall, yet everyone seems to feel when something is wrong in the pattern. A hoe is nudged back into line, a jar shifted away from an edge, a knife lifted and returned to its familiar peg with a small, unconscious correction. The unspoken rule here is simple. Tomorrow should not be made harder by what is carelessly left tonight. When the first few workers start down the path toward the farmhouse, the others fall in behind them without needing instruction. The group arranges itself as naturally as water following the easiest channel. Heavier loads settle into the middle, older knees choose the smoother ground. Younger legs bounce lightly at the edges, testing loose stones without much consequence. You walk among them and feel how belonging here has far more to do with stepping into this rhythm than with any formal welcome. The farmhouse waits where the slope softens, thick stone walls holding on to the last warmth of the day. A low boundary wall frames a small courtyard stamped hard by feet and seasons, and along one side herbs crowd chipped clay pots, releasing sharp green scents whenever cloth or skin brushes past. You step around a bucket, a dozing dog, a carefully stacked row of firewood, and realize you're already learning another of this place's rules. Leave clear paths for the work that will begin again before sunrise. Inside, the air is cooler and quieter, the thick walls softening both heat and sound into something gentle. Tools hang from pegs in their usual order, sandals rest side by side near the threshold, and a low table holds bread, olives, a pinch of salt, and a clay jug breathing out a faint fermented tang from last year's harvest. A small shift along a bench makes space for you. Nothing grand, just enough room for one more tired body that has walked the rows. As you sit among them, watching the end-of-day pattern complete itself, tools settled, dust washed away, food shared, one last absent-minded glance toward the darkening hillside, you begin to see the quiet structure holding their lives together. The rules are almost entirely unspoken. Show up, notice small changes, mend what can be mended, use what still has strength, share whatever remains. It is not heroic and certainly not glamorous, but as the night breeze slips through the doorway and your shoulders finally drop, you realize how deeply your own restless mind has been craving exactly this kind of simple, reliable rhythm. When the room has sunk into the heavy, even breathing of people truly finished for the day, you slip outside again. Your limbs are pleasantly sore now, the kind of tired that feels like you've finally been used for the right purpose. The courtyard feels wider in the cooler air. Tools hang in quiet outlines against the wall, and the last glow of the sky rests along the roof lines, like a promise that tomorrow will begin here again, in exactly this simple, predictable way. You pass through the low gate and onto the lane that curves away from the farmhouse. The sky has entered its soft middle state, no longer day and not yet properly night. A band of pale violet floats above the hills, and the first faint stars test themselves in it. The breeze has put down its daytime tools and now just wanders, brushing your neck, carrying the mixed scent of dust, cooling stone, and a thin thread of crushed leaf drifting from the terraces above. Even off the slope, you can feel the vineyard behind you, an unseen weight of ordered green pressed into the hillside, breathing steadily in the dimness. Under your feet, the road is hardened earth speckled with small stones. Shallow ruts from wheels and hooves have been pressed into it over years of repetition, so your steps fall into them without effort. Each footfall makes a tiny sound, brief crunch, soft slide, then nothing. And the night swallows it as if it has all the time in the world. Your own breath has slipped into the same patient rhythm as the hill you've spent the day walking. On one side, the terraces drop in long, dark bands that hug the curve of the land. Inside that darkness, you know there are stakes and tendrils and carefully guided channels, all sleeping. On the other side, the land loosens into other kinds of work. Short grain stubble catches the last stray hints of light. Low vegetable beds sink into thicker patches of shadow, and a small cluster of trees bends inward around a well. The vineyard may be the pride of this place, but it leans hard on this rough patchwork for bread, fodder, and animal feed, the quiet everyday fuel that lets careful hands keep returning to the rows. The lane bends, and a small roadside shrine appears ahead, set a little above the track on a flat rock. It is nothing grand, a squat stone pillar with a shallow niche, edges softened by weather and touch. Inside the niche, a clay lamp burns with a low, steady flame, its light licking the stone and leaving soft shadows in every crack. At the base of the pillar lie simple offerings, some dried herbs, a pinch of scattered grain, a crusted patch where wine once darkened the rock and then slowly surrendered to air and time. You stop without really planning to. The shrine feels like the hill's memory, an anchored place where all the hurried wishes and tired thanks of the day can come to rest. Workers on their way to the fields at dawn, travelers slipping between villages, children dragged along on errands, they all pause here, even briefly, to ask the unseen to keep the seen gentle. Your vineyard is part of this quiet exchange too, supported not only by soil and water and sweat, but by the stubborn human habit of whispering hope into open air and trusting that someone or something is listening. From the shrine's little rise, the view stretches toward the village below. Roofs gather in a loose cluster around a widening in the road. Here and there a doorway glows with firelight, sending a thin stripe of gold across the packed earth. Narrow threads of smoke climb upward and unravel into the deepening sky. Down there, bread is being torn, stew stirred, cups refilled. Simple math is done in food and favors. Who helped whom, who lent what, who will need a hand tomorrow. The jars that will one day hold your hillside's wine will sit on those tables. In return, that gathered life will send back coins, tools, cloth, salt, and all the modest essentials that never make it into legends, but always keep the work possible. You follow the lane down, the slope now working with your tired legs instead of against them. Farmhouses appear one by one, built low and thick beside the road. A wooden cart rests under a lean-to, its wheels dusted with the same pale earth you walked all day, the same earth that clings to roots in the rows. Near another doorway, bundles of branches wait for the ovens that will bake bread for the hands that pick grapes. A tethered donkey shifts. Chickens tuck their heads under wings. Everything here hauls, feeds, and quietly returns what it no longer needs to the soil. At last, the road widens almost shyly into a small, uneven square. By day, carts will gather here with sacks of grain, jars of oil, baskets of vegetables, stacks of pottery, and later the heavy containers of wine from your hillside. People will bargain without much drama, mutter, laugh, trade news of weather and harvests, and rumors from beyond the next valley. The vines above will never see any of this, but their fate is shaped here as much as among the rows. Prices agreed, debts settled, provisions bought that make pruning, tying, and harvesting possible in the first place. You stand for a moment in the center of the square, breathing in smoke, straw, and the faint tang of ferment rising from some doorway you cannot see. Tending the vineyard, you realize, is not only about walking between stakes and leaves. It is also about belonging to this wider web of fields, shrines, roads, and rooms that surround them and quietly hold them up. In the cool, just before dawn, the vineyard feels as if it is holding its breath. The air is still, the wind resting somewhere higher on the ridge, and the stars fade into a pale wash of future light. You follow the path your feet now know, the terraces around you reduced to long, patient shadows. The vines are only hints in the dimness, suggested by the regular rhythm of posts and rails, yet you can feel them there, rows of plants quietly finishing the night's slow work. Instead of turning into the rows, you follow the path that curves behind the farmhouse where the hill folds inward. A low stone building waits there, half sunk into the slope, its doorway dark and cool. The lintel and doorposts are smoothed at the edges by years of hands and shoulders. From the opening flows a breath of chill air, carrying damp stone and the deep, slightly sour sweetness of wine that has been resting in the dark longer than any of today's worries will last. You step inside and the temperature drops at once, wrapping itself around your skin like a calmer, steadier version of you. Outside, the day is already thinking about heat. Here, time settles and thickens. Your eyes adjust and pull shapes from shadow. Beams stained by smoke across the ceiling. Heavy wooden presses along one wall, their frames built to endure harvest after harvest. Crossbeams wait to be turned, and below them empty troughs stand ready for fresh juice, their interiors permanently marked by other seasons. Along the floor crouch the cellar's quiet treasures, rows of rounded clay amphorae, their bellies resting in shallow hollows, mouths sealed with wax and resin. Some are tall and narrow, others squat and broad, but each was chosen with care. Faint, scratched marks on their sides tell the workers what lies inside. Last year's pressing, a stronger batch kept for trade, a jar set aside for shared meals. To you, they are sleeping vessels, each holding summer sunlight that has forgotten it was ever a leaf or a grape. You move among them, fingertips hovering just above rough clay. The air is still enough that even small sounds feel large. The rustle of your sleeve, the slow push of your breath, a tiny crackle where a seal releases a breath of trapped gas. Somewhere inside those vessels, countless tiny lives are busy turning crushed grapes into something new, working drop by patient drop. Your own time, usually chopped into alerts and interruptions, feels almost laughable beside their steady, unbothered pace. Along one wall, tools hang in careful order, their shapes forming a simple catalog of work. Baskets woven from tough reeds wait for the season when they will strain under the weight of fruit. Long-handled rakes and wooden paddles will guide pulp in the press, stir fermenting liquid. Short knives, sharpened so often that their silhouettes have changed, hold the memory of pruning and careful cuts at harvest. On a shelf nearby, clay cups and ladles sit by a shallow basin, ready for tasting, not with ceremony, but with practical curiosity. Without thinking too hard about it, you straighten a leaning basket, nudge a handle back onto its peg, smooth a wrinkle in a wax seal. The seller seems to invite this quiet tidying. Order is not about perfection here. It is about kindness to your future self on the busiest days, when heavy baskets, sticky hands, and aching legs will not want to waste effort hunting for a missing paddle. Right now you move through cool shadows. Later you will be drenched in sweat and grape juice, grateful for every small preparation made in this calm hour. Standing in this half-buried space, you understand that the vineyard lives on two different clocks. Above, among the leaves and sunlight, everything changes quickly. Clouds, temperature, insect swarms, the chance of rain. Your work there is about today and tomorrow, about noticing small shifts and answering them immediately. Down here, in stone and clay and filtered light, time stretches into months and years. The decisions you make in the rows now will not fully reveal themselves until much later, when some future hand breaks a seal on one of these jars and pours out a thin stream of your past labor. You turn back toward the doorway and that pale rectangle of morning sky. Behind you, the cellar sinks again into its deep patience, happy to let invisible transformations continue in the dark without any help from you. Ahead, the hillside is beginning to glow at the edges, a hint of gold touching the highest leaves. You climb toward the vines carrying the cellar's coolness in your skin, aware that every leaf you brush, every tendril you guide, is already part of a story that will end in the clay shadows below, in a jar that smells faintly of earth, sun, and all the quiet work you are only just beginning to understand. By late morning, the world has shifted into its bright, uncompromising self. The sun climbs higher over the hills, and shadows that were long and generous at dawn shrink into thin outlines along the stone walls and around the bases of the vines. You are already on the slope when this happens, feet planted among the rows, sleeves pushed up, skin aware of every extra degree the day has decided to add. The vineyard sings a different song now. Crickets buzz more insistently, as if trying to match the intensity of the light. A faint shimmer wavers above the pale soil, making distant terraces blur and wobble, as though the land is slightly unsure where exactly its edges are today. Heat radiates from the stones, rises through the soles of your feet, and settles along your spine, a steady reminder that this green abundance is built on rock, dryness, and the refusal to give up. You begin with the simplest tasks, the ones that feel almost like a moving meditation. In one hand, you carry a small basket, In the other, a short knife with a handle polished by many other palms. You slip between the vines, eyes scanning for leaves that have grown too dense, casting heavy shade over the grapes and trapping still air around them. Whenever you find a cluster of overlapping leaves, you pinch off just one or two, never enough to leave the fruit exposed and harshly sunstruck, just enough to let the light sift through in a softer pattern. Each snip is small, but it changes the little world around a single cluster. Where before the air was stagnant and slightly damp, now a faint breeze can slip in, brushing the grapes and carrying away the moisture that might linger too long. It is like opening a tiny window in a crowded room. You repeat the pattern again and again. Reach, lift, judge, cut, let the wind do the rest. No one is counting how many you manage per hour. The vines care only that you look closely and act gently. The heat presses more firmly as the sun climbs. Sweat gathers along your neck and shoulders, then moves in slow, ticklish paths down your back. In the life you came from, sweat usually meant gyms, crowded buses, or trying not to ruin your shirt before a meeting. Here, it is simply part of the unspoken agreement. You give the vineyard salt and water from your own body, and in return, it gives you narrow strips of shade, the smell of crushed green, and the promise of cool stone at the end of the day. You still wouldn't turn down a fan and an iced drink, but somehow the unfairness of history bothers you less when the breeze finally stirs and brushes damp skin, turning discomfort into almost luxurious relief. Around the middle terrace, you pause to adjust one of the trellises. A wooden post has leaned forward under the slow, insistent pull of the vine, its top dragged down by growth that has forgotten its own weight. You loosen a few tendrils, coaxing them free from their accidental tangle, then plant your feet and press the post upright again. The earth resists for a moment, then yields with a soft crunch as the base settles more firmly. You retie the main stems with a length of fiber, the knot quick and sure, not because you have done this for years, but because your hands have been quietly learning from every tie you have seen, every secure loop you have tested with a tug. From where you stand, you notice other figures scattered across the hillside, each absorbed in their own quiet thread of work. One moves along the uppermost row, checking the shallow water channels, scraping at a clogged curve with a stick until the thin film of mud finally breaks and a trickle resumes its slow journey across the terrace. Another works lower down, kneeling at the base of a vine to spread a thin ring of compost, returning to the soil what last year's harvest took away. No one shouts instructions. The pattern of the work is already agreed upon, held in the habits of bodies rather than in spoken plans. The breeze arrives properly now, sliding in from the direction of the distant sea you cannot see, but somehow still feel, in the faint tang in the air, in the way the heat loosens its grip. The leaves respond at once, shivering softly, their undersides flickering pale like thousands of tiny signals. The sound is dry and gentle at the same time, a constant rustle like pages being turned in a book that never ends. You move in rhythm with it without meaning to, your breathing unconsciously sinking to the hush and stir of green around you. At a small break between rows, someone has left a clay jug partly buried in the soil, its lower half kept cool by the earth. You ease the stopper out and lift it, letting the rim rest against your mouth. The water inside tastes faintly of clay and minerals, the good kind of simplicity. It is not cold, not exactly, but compared to the air, it feels soothing, like a promise that this day will not ask more of you than you can give. You drink just enough to steady yourself, then nestle the jug back into its hollow, leaving it for the next pair of tired hands. The hours slide by not in minutes, but in small tasks completed. A strip of weeds at the edge of a terrace is eased from the soil, roots untangled and shaken free. A low stone wall is restacked where last winter's rain nudged a few rocks loose. A small pile of broken branches and pruned canes grows in the shadow of an olive tree at the corner of the field, future kindling quietly waiting its turn. Nothing you touch today would impress anyone in a grand story, but every small act nudges the vineyard a little closer to balance. Eventually, the sun reaches the high point where even the breeze feels drowsy, moving only in occasional half-hearted sighs. Somewhere beyond the hill, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. The air hums with insects and warmth. You set down your basket, straighten your back, and look across the rows, their parallel lines shimmering toward the horizon. The hillside is bright and exposed, every leaf and stone etched in sharp detail. And yet, wrapped in the slow repetition of tending these plants, you feel strangely sheltered, as if the very act of paying careful attention has turned this wide, hot vineyard into a quiet, private sanctuary built of light, wind, and gently breathing leaves. The afternoon begins to lean toward evening, but the heat hangs on longer than it should. You can feel it in the way the air hesitates before cooling, as if the day is reluctant to let go. The breeze that felt kind an hour ago has shifted to something drier, thinner, like a cloth that has been wrung out too many times. It still moves the leaves, still brushes your skin, but there is a faint rasp to it now, a roughness under the softness. You notice it first in your breathing. Earlier, each inhale felt steady and full. Now there is a tiny scratch at the back of your throat. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make you swallow more often. Dust hangs a little longer in the air when your foot disturbs it, as if the ground is more eager to stay skyward. The light has gone sharper too, colors turning a notch more brittle. Greens that felt lush and deep this morning now look slightly bleached at the edges. It is the same hillside, the same rows, but the mood has tilted. You move along a familiar terrace, eyes trained on the vines you have been handling all day. At first glance, they look as they always do, leaves layered and trembling, grapes clustered in small shaded groups. But when you step closer, you see that a few leaves in the middle of the row hold themselves differently. Instead of lying open and easy, they curl inward along their edges, as if they are slowly trying to fold into themselves. The green is still there, but a pale, almost yellowish sheen has slipped in near the tips, like tiredness showing in the corners of someone's eyes. You touch one leaf lightly with the back of your fingers. It feels warmer than it should at this hour. The surface slightly less supple, not brittle, not yet, but leaning in that direction. You glance down at the soil beneath the vine. The shallow water channel that runs nearby holds only a thin line of darker earth now, no glint of moisture catching the light. The ground that was only dry on top this morning feels bone light even when you scrape deeper with your boot. It crumbles easily, too pleased to fall apart. The change is not everywhere. A few steps away, another vine looks as relaxed as ever, leaves open, clusters plump and comfortable in their shaded pockets. That small contrast somehow makes the worrying patches worse. If everything were suffering, you could tell yourself it was just a hard day. Instead, the problem appears in scattered pockets, like a pattern you do not yet understand. You find yourself scanning the rows more closely, eyes trained not on the grapes, but on the angles of the leaves, the way they hold themselves, the sharpness of their edges. Higher up the slope, the wind gathers a little more strength, but it has lost its earlier coolness. It sweeps over you like air from an oven door briefly opened and then closed again. It carries not the smell of distant rain, but the powdery scent of very dry stone and faraway smoke. You lift your head and squint toward the horizon. Instead of the soft cumulus clouds that often build in the afternoons, the sky is a high, pale dome, with only faint streaks that look like scratches than promises. The sun's light has flattened, bleaching depth from the hills. You think back to the cellar's cool breath, to the amphoras resting in their hollows, and realize that all of that patient magic depends on what happens up here, in this too bright hour where the vines stand exposed. No amount of skill in the press or discipline in the cellar can fix grapes that have quietly given up before they were ready. The thought is small but solid, like a stone dropped into your stomach. It does not panic you, but it rests there with weight. Down on a lower terrace, you see one of the older workers pause and straighten slowly, shielding their eyes with a hand. They study the sky, then the vines, then the empty channel that should hold at least a thin skin of moving water. Their shoulders lift on a long breath, then sink again. They do not rush or flail. Years have taught them that the hillside rarely responds to drama. But even at this distance, you can sense their awareness sharpen, their attention narrow. You are not imagining this shift. The land has turned its face slightly toward difficulty. You walk the length of one entire row, counting quietly in your head how many vines show early signs of strain. Not everyone, not even most, but enough that you can't file it away as nothing. Curling here, dulling there, a few grapes that feel a touch less firm under your fingers than they did that morning. It's the kind of change you could easily miss if you rushed or if you refused to believe that a single day could nudge the future of the harvest. You are learning, though, that tending this place means noticing discomfort when it is still whispering. At the end of the terrace, you pause beside a low wall and rest your hands on the warm stone. The heat seeps into your palms, more intense than you expect for this hour. Beyond, the valley looks deceptively calm. Fields lying flat in soft colors, the road tracing its usual pale line, the village roofs huddled as before. Nothing rises or storms or shouts, and yet in the particular way the light hits the dust, in the dry set of the horizon, in the quiet complaint of leaves just beginning to curl, the vineyard is telling you something. You stand there for a moment, breathing shallowly through the heat, and allow the truth to settle without resisting it. The vines are not in crisis, not yet, but they are uneasy. The sky is wide and empty when it should be building clouds. Water that usually lingers in channels has already sunk or evaporated. The hillside, which felt so steady in the morning, now feels a fraction more fragile, as if one more hot day might tip some delicate balance you do not fully see. You turn back toward the center of the vineyard with your senses awake in a new way. Every rustle of leaf, every patch of soil, every hint of wind now carries extra meaning. A subtle threat has entered the edges of this place. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just a dry hand slowly tightening on the strings that hold the vines in comfort. You know, without anyone needing to say it out loud, that you and the others will have to answer this in your own quiet, deliberate way, before the hill's worries grow louder than a whisper. You do not raise an alarm. The vineyard would not know what to do with one. It speaks in small changes, and now that you have seen the curling leaves and powder-dried channels, you cannot pretend not to hear. On a lower terrace, a knot of workers stands by an empty trench, tools resting loosely in their hands. One heel presses into the bed of the channel, and the crust breaks with a brittle snap, more pottery than soil. And their shared glance from cracked earth to distant cistern is decision enough. The water's habits must change. You climb with them toward the stone basin cut into the slope, sun leaning hot on the back of your neck. At the top, the cistern is still a shallow, patient bowl, but its surface sits low, and the spring that feeds it arrives with a tired trickle. No disaster, just a quiet shortage that could become one if everyone pretends it isn't there. From the rim, earthen channels branch away in several directions, simple grooves that usually share the flow fairly. Today, fairness waits. With flat stones and damp handfuls of soil, you help pinch one channel narrower, open another, close a third for now, raising tiny dams that crumble and rise again until the water accepts the new instructions and turns, a thin, bright line choosing a different path down the hill. You walk beside it, pace matched to the slow movement of the stream. Every few steps you crouch and press your fingertips into the channel bed. Near the cistern, the soil is cool and heavy. Farther down, it has been little more than memory. But now a slim darkness begins to spread, and when the first redirected trickle reaches the thirsty terrace, the earth drinks so fast the color barely deepens, though under your nails you can feel damp instead of dust. On neighboring slopes, others answer the same problem from below. You take up a short-handled hoe and scrape at the pale crust around each vine, the surface breaking in thin flakes to expose slightly darker soil that accepts the tool more willingly. And around each trunk you draw a shallow bowl to catch whatever water passes, runoff, heavy dew, a brief, grudging shower. From the farmhouse, bundles of straw and dried leaves arrive in baskets and arms. You help lay them in modest rings around the thirstiest plants, fibers scratching your forearms as you spread them into rough blankets that shade the ground, slow the sun's theft, and keep the night's moisture from vanishing with the first beam of morning. Nothing miraculous, just 1,000 small mercies toward roots you never see. Work eases only when the light itself begins to soften, turning from sharp white to a gentler gold. On your way back down the hill, your feet carry you past the little roadside shrine where the clay lamp's flame is pale in the remaining brightness, but still burns. And at its base, fresh offerings lie, a sprig of green, a thumbprint of wine, a few grains of wheat glitting faintly in the dust. You stop and let the dust slide off your fingers onto the rock, an accidental offering from the terraces above. You do not bargain. You have done what you can with channels and straw, and now you simply acknowledge that the rest belongs to whatever governs clouds and springs and the unseen depths of stone. That you are allowed to be diligent without pretending to command the sky. Back at the farmhouse, the evening routine shifts around the vineyard's unease. Clay jars are topped up and left closer to the door, ready to be carried to fragile vines if tomorrow arrives as dry as today. And a few tools remain leaning by the threshold instead of hung with ceremony on their pegs, a quiet admission that the morning may start in a hurry. You return to the slope once more before dusk, drawn there the way you once checked a glowing screen one last time. The changes are small but real. Some leaves still curl, but not as tightly. Thin bands of darker earth now trace the newly guided channels. The breeze is still dry, but a fraction cooler, more like a hand laid softly across your shoulders than a blast from an open oven. Standing between two rows, dust on your skin and straw clinging to your clothes, you let your shoulders drop. You have not conjured rain or transformed the hillside with a grand gesture, only met its quiet distress with slow, practical kindness. Redirected water, loosened soil, shaded roots, a moment of respect at a weathered stone. And the problem is not gone, but the vineyard is no longer facing it alone, which turns out to be enough to let you breathe more easily as the vines fade into silhouettes around you. The last of the light pulls itself slowly off the hillside, as if reluctant to leave you after the long, dry day. You stay among the rows anyway, letting your eyes learn how to see in the softening colors. The vines are no longer bright and insistent. They sink into gentler shapes, leaves darkening to velvety silhouettes edged in faint silver where the sky still holds a little glow. The heat loosens its grip in stages. First, the sharpness fades, stones stop burning through your soles and settle for being simply warm. Then the air around your chest and shoulders eases, like a too-tight band finally unfastened. The breeze, which spent all afternoon rasping, now sighs along the terraces with a cooler, more forgiving hand. You can almost hear the hillside unclench. You walk a familiar row, one you checked earlier when the leaves first began to curl. Their shapes are easier to read now in the low light. Instead of harsh highlights and deep shadows, everything exists in gradients. You reach out and touch a leaf you remember from earlier. It still curls at the edges, but the curve is softer, less tense. The surface is cooler under your fingertips, and when you press gently, it yields instead of resisting like stiff paper. The change is small, microscopic even, but tangible. The plant has stopped panicking. Beneath your boots, the soil feels different too. In the afternoon, each step sent up a little puff of dust that hung in the air like a complaint. Now the ground has gained a faint weight. The water you coaxed down from the cistern, those narrow threads redirected from one terrace to another, have not worked miracles, but they have given the earth just enough to remember how to be soil instead of powder. Where you scraped earlier, the surface crest has begun to darken in thin islands, and when you prod it with your toe, it gives with a slight promising stick rather than chattering. As twilight deepens, a coolness begins to rise from places that hid from the sun all day. The shaded side of stone walls, the hollows between terraces, the bed of the dried channel that now carries only the memory of water. The air at your ankles is cooler than the air at your chest. Your calves feel a settled chill, where before there was only heat. It is like walking through invisible, horizontal rivers of temperature, each one sliding quietly into place as the hill rearranges its layers for the night. By the time true darkness takes the slope, the sky overhead has turned into a deep bowl pricked by stars. There is no city glow here, no neon to compete. The constellations are sharp, almost shameless in how clearly they show themselves. You tilt your head back and pick out a few shapes, not by name, just by feeling, the way you once learned the layout of your own furniture in the dark. Somewhere far beyond them, future centuries fidget impatiently with electric light and weather forecasts. But up here you are stuck with the original notification system. Clear sky, dry night, one more day in which the vineyard must fend for itself, only with your redirected channels, straw, and stubbornness as backup. You sleep briefly back at the farmhouse, but it is the light kind of rest that never fully anchors, the sort you fall into when a small worry keeps its hand on your shoulder. Before dawn, you wake and find your way out again, feet following paths they now know without needing much guidance. The air has changed while you were gone. It is cold enough to shock you fully awake, a clean, almost metallic chill that fills your lungs and pushes out the last fragments of sleep. On the hillside, the vines have turned into shadowy walls again, but this time their touch is different. When you brush past, your hands and sleeves come away damp. Dew has descended in the hours you missed, moving silently across the valley, deciding which surfaces to kiss and which to leave alone. It has chosen the vineyard generously. Each leaf is filmed with a thin sparkle, tiny droplets clinging to edges and veins, quivering when the faintest breeze passes. You choose one vine and lean close. Drops have gathered along the underside of a curling leaf, heavier at the tip where they merge and fall, one by one, into the soil cup you carved around the trunk. It's slow, patient rain delivered leaf by leaf, drop by drop. No ceremony, no thunder. You can almost imagine the vine sighing as the cool moisture slips down through its tissues, relieving the tension that built all afternoon. Your sandals leave darker prints on the ground now. Every step presses into slightly damp earth that remembers last night's generosity. The channels you helped direct carry thin, shining threads where dew and seepage have collected, running lazily along the grooves toward the thirstiest terraces. You crouch and dip your fingers in one. The water is cold, with a faint iron taste of stone and the ghost of leaves where it brushed past them on its way down. As the first pale light sneaks up behind the hills, colors begin to seep back into the world. The sky grows from charcoal to deep blue to a washed-out gray, then slowly warms at the edges. The vineyard responds in tiny increments. Leaves that looked almost black in the dark revealed themselves as layered greens again, but softer now, less strained. Some still curl, but their posture is closer to the relaxed fold of someone adjusting a blanket than to the tight clench of worry. Grapes look plumper, their skins faintly mottled by dew that's just about to slide off in fat, reluctant drops. You walk among them as the light strengthens, rechecking the same plants you studied in the harsh afternoon glare. The comparison is clear. The crisis remained a threat, but your work and the night have teamed up to negotiate a truce. The hillside hasn't forgotten the drought-leaning sky, but it has decided not to surrender just yet. Your redirected water, loosened soil, and rings of straw have turned the worst of yesterday's fear into something manageable, something the land can handle if you keep showing up. Standing there, between rows silvered by dwindling dew, you realize how much of this job is about trusting processes you cannot see. Roots you never meet are drinking quietly in the dark. Tiny organisms in the soil are rearranging nutrients grain by grain. Undetectable shifts in air and moisture are slowly tilting the hillside back toward balance. You are not the hero of this place, just a patient collaborator, someone who nudges and arranges and then steps back to let cooler air and dewfall do their part. The sun finally lifts its rim over the far hills, throwing a soft horizontal light across the terraces. It catches on every remaining drop, turning the rows into long necklaces of trembling silver. For a brief moment, the entire vineyard looks adorned, dressed up in its finest, not for an audience, but as a quiet reward for having endured the dry, relentless day before. You take it in, breathing deep, feeling the chill fade slowly from your skin as warmth returns in a gentler, more reasonable form. The vines have made it through the strain of yesterday. The work you did with the others has joined forces with the simplest of allies, cool night and patient dew, to keep them on their feet. The worry in your chest loosens, not entirely, but enough that you can step into the new day with a softer heart, knowing that this hillside, for all its fragility, is also remarkably good at healing itself when given even the smallest chance. The days slide forward, each one a little fuller, a little sweeter. The worst of the dryness passes, not with a dramatic storm, but with a stubborn string of cooler nights and just enough mornings, each adding a thin layer of comfort to the hillside. The vines, which once held themselves like anxious shoulders, relax into their own weight, leaves open and sure. Grapes deepen in color every day, as if they are quietly pulling darkness out of the soil and storing it in their skins. You move among them with a different kind of attention now. Earlier in the season, your work was about keeping the vines alive, lifting, shading, watering, loosening soil so roots could breathe. Now your role slips from guardian to judge, deciding when this long, slow effort has become ready to gather. Too early, and the grapes will be sharp and thin. Too late, and their sweetness will sag. The window is narrow and has to be felt rather than calculated. You begin with the simplest test, looking. The faint greenish cast that once clung to the grapes has retreated. The clusters you examine now are rich and deep, some a dusty purple, others nearly black, with a soft bloom of natural wax. When you lift a cluster toward the light, the berries no longer glow from within, but hold the brightness on their surface. A few scattered grapes are slightly shriveled, sweetness concentrated rather than lost, a quiet sign that the season is nearing its peak. Touch tells another part of the story. Under your fingertips, the berries feel firm, but no longer tight with immaturity. When you press one gently, there is a tiny give before the skin pushes back, like a breath that has learned to relax without collapsing. You twist a grape free and roll it between finger and thumb, weighing the ratio of juice to flesh, skin to softness, the way a potter weighs a piece of clay and somehow already knows what it can become. Then you taste. Standing between two rows, with the breeze slipping through the leaves, you let a grape break under your teeth. In the early weeks, the fruit was all acid and impatience, stinging your tongue and promising better days. Today, the juice that floods your mouth is balanced. It arrives bright at the front of your tongue, then deepens into a slower, warmer sweetness that lingers at the back, leaving a faint grip along your gums from skins and seeds. It is not perfect, because nothing grown in real soil ever is, but it feels honest to this hill, this year. You repeat the ritual on different terraces, different faces of the slope. Shaded clusters carry a touch more freshness. Sun-bathed bunches lean into richness. Some vines are a step ahead, some a step behind. But when you stand back and consider the whole, you feel it in your body more than in your thoughts. The vineyard has reached its quiet yes. The harvest does not announce itself with trumpets. It simply gathers enough whispered signs that pretending to wait much longer would be its own kind of neglect. Down by the farmhouse, the world begins to rearrange itself around that unspoken decision. Baskets are pulled from their lean-to shelter. Reeds are checked and mended where time has eaten through a strand. You test the strength of handles with an imaginary weight of grapes until they creak in a way that says, reliable, not doomed. Ropes are inspected and retied, frayed ends twisted back into usefulness. Even the old press in the cellar seems more awake when you pass it, wooden beams quietly bracing for the slow strain of days ahead. The courtyard fills with small preparations. Cloths are washed and flung over a low hedge to dry, ready to wipe sticky hands and line baskets. Clay jugs are rinsed inside and out. From a few of them rises the faint herbal scent of leaves used as scrubbers. You carry the cleaned vessels back into the cellar and set them in simple, logical paths so no one will have to fumble in the heat and tired rush to find what they need. Outside, in the village square, cart wheels are greased and harnesses checked so that no cracked leather will fail at the worst moment. In the evenings, as you walk home from the terraces, you notice another kind of preparation humming in the air. The songs are not official yet. No one has declared it rehearsal time. But fragments of melody begin to attach themselves to ordinary work. Someone hums while coiling rope. Someone else whistles softly while scraping dirt from a hoe. And those small tunes drift upward to the vines like early birds of a coming flock. Their rhythms are steady and repetitive, made not to impress, but to carry bodies through hours of bending and lifting. You catch yourself matching your steps to one of them, breath falling into its pattern, already half inside the first harvest day, as even the hillside folds into night. The morning of the harvest arrives without fanfare, the way most of the important things in your life actually do. You wake before the sun because your body has quietly learned the vineyard schedule, and today its pulse is a little quicker, a little brighter, like a deep breath before a plunge. The air in the farmhouse doorway is cool and faintly sweet, carrying a trace of dust, smoke, and crushed leaf from yesterday's last walk among the rows. In the courtyard, baskets wait in a loose line, leaning against one another as if they too are still half asleep. Their woven sides smell of dried reeds and old summers, the ghosts of previous harvests clinging to the fibers. You pick one up and feel the familiar curve of the handle settle into your palm, almost weightless for now. Around you, other hands reach for their own baskets. Shoulders roll, backs stretch, and without anyone announcing it, the little procession up the hill begins. Your feet find the path in that blurred half-light when the world is undecided about colors. The soil is cool and slightly damp from the breath of the night, giving just enough under your steps to leave faint prints that the sun will erase later. Above, the vines hold their fruit like secrets, clusters hanging heavy and quiet in the pale gray of almost morning. At the first row, you set your basket down with a hollow thump and slide your hands into the leaves. Grapes emerge from their green shelter, full and dark, coated with a soft bloom that dulls their shine. For a heartbeat, you simply hold the first cluster, feeling its cool weight in your palm, a small universe of sunlight, wind, and worry condensed into one shape. Then the work begins. Thumb and fingers twist and lift. The stem releases with a tiny snap you would have never noticed in your old life. You lay the grapes into the basket, where they land with the soft, padded thud. Reach, part, cradle, twist, snap, set down. The motion repeats until it feels like the vineyard has taken your hands and taught them its own language. The rhythm is so simple that your thoughts cannot help but slow to match it. There is nothing clever to do, nothing to optimize or hack. You just keep moving, and the vines quietly reward the attention you give them. The sun rises by degrees, washing color back into the world. Greens deepen, earth warms, the pale sky sharpens into blue. Light filters through the leaves, fragmenting into little coins that flicker across your wrists and the fruit. Sweat begins to map slow paths down your back, but even that feels straightforward, honest. Just your body paying the small fee for belonging to this hillside today. Your basket, so light at the start, gradually acquires seriousness. A few clusters make no difference. A few dozen turn each step into a quiet negotiation between intention and weight. When the handle finally bites into your fingers, you carry the load to the end of the row, where larger tubs wait in the meager shade of a wall. You tip the basket and watch grapes cascade out in a muted rush, like a slow purple-green waterfall. A few escape, rolling toward the edge, and you catch them without thinking, unwilling to let even one small globe of effort smash on the ground. Then it's back again, empty basket, lighter feet, new row. Time thins out. You stop tracking it in hours and start measuring it in how many times you filled and emptied the basket, in how deeply the sweet green scent of crushed stems has lodged in your lungs. Around you, others move in the same rhythm, a quiet choreography of bending and straightening, lifting and pouring. The hillside that once felt huge and demanding now feels like a series of small, solvable moments. This cluster, this step, this basket. The endless background hum of your usual worries fades, not because anything out there has changed, but because your body is finally too occupied with something real and repetitive to feed them. By midday, the upper terraces are dotted with filled tubs and flattened patches of grass where baskets have rested. The sun stands high and unapologetic, but inside your head, there is more space than there has been in a long time. Your world has shrunk, in the best way, to simple questions. Is this cluster ready? Is that tub full? Can you carry one more load before you stop to drink? When at last the cry goes up that the rows are finished for the day, you feel the shift before you hear it, a tiny loosening in the posture of everyone on the hill, as if the vines themselves have exhaled. In the afternoon, the work flows downhill toward the half-buried cellar where the press waits. You followed the line of people carrying brimming cubs along the path, feet squelching now and then where a careless step has burst a grape and left a dark stain in the dust. The air cools as you descend, and the smell changes too. Up on the terraces, the scent is green and dry. Here at the cellar mouth, it thickens into something deeper and sweeter, threaded with the tang of ferment from seasons already sealed in clay. Inside, the press opens like a wooden mouth, its basin ready to receive the day's labor. The harvested grapes are poured in, mounding up in a chaotic pile of color and softness. For a moment you simply look, aware that this is the tipping point between fruit and wine, the last instant in which these grapes still exist as themselves. Then you step in. Cool skins give way under your feet. The first contact is a shock, slick, yielding, unexpectedly cold. Then the sensation settles into a strange, deep comfort. You tread slowly, aware of seeds skittering away from your soles, and of juice rising around your ankles, and of the wet, rhythmic sound of surrender as each berry bursts. Sticky sweetness wraps your legs, your balance adjusts to the shifting pulpy floor, and you fall into yet another pattern. Step, press, turn, repeat. The must flows outward, guided by the press into troughs, where it gathers and then spills into waiting jars and vats. It moves steadily, not in dramatic dashes, but in patient streams like thickened time sliding away from the present. Months of weather, nights of worry, mornings of quiet correction all liquefy and run toward the future in those slow, gleaming ribbons. When you finally step out of the press, your legs are stained, your clothes spattered, your hands sticky and fragrant. You are tired in every reasonable place, feet, back, shoulders, but somewhere behind your ribs, everything feels unexpectedly clear. The long, unhurried day of picking, carrying and pressing, has sanded down the edges of your thoughts until only the simplest truths remain. The vines gave what they could, you did what you could, and now the hillside rests a little lighter while the jars below grow heavy with what comes next. By the time the last tubs are emptied and the press is wiped down to a reasonable sort of stickiness, night has settled completely over the hillside. When you step out of the cellar, the air feels clean and cool against your tired skin, thin after a whole day of grape-scented warmth. The sky above is a deep Roman indigo, full of sharp stars, and for a moment you just stand there, legs slightly unsteady, breathing and tasting the faint sweetness of crushed fruit still clinging to your hands and clothes. Your feet remember the soft give of pulp under your soles, even though you're back on solid ground. The farmhouse courtyard is no longer a work site. The baskets and tools that filled it this morning have been pushed aside, stacked neatly against walls and under eaves. In their place, low tables and benches form loose circles under the open sky. Lanterns hang from hooks and tree branches, soft flames cupped in clay and glass, spilling amber light over stone, dust, and faces. Shadows sway gently as people cross with platters and jugs, and the air carries the mixed scents of baked bread, olives, cooked brain, and smoke. It isn't loud. It's the kind of quiet that happens when everyone is equally tired and equally relieved. You rinse your hands and face at the trough, watching faint pinkish streaks of wine and dust swirl away. The water is cold enough to make you inhale sharply, then loosen your shoulders. Some stands stay, caught in your fingernails and along your wrists, but you keep them like a soft badge of the day. When you sit, the bench feels solid and familiar under you, as if it's been waiting all day for your weight. A loaf is placed nearby, crust dark and blistered. You break off a piece, the inside still warm, soft, smelling of grain and fire. Dipped in oil, sprinkled with a little salt and herb, it tastes like the hillside translated into food. Clay jugs appear along the table, their rounded sides cool in your hands. From one, last year's wine is poured into simple cups, dark and steady. It's the old harvest welcoming the new one in. You raise your cup and breathe in fruit, earth, a hint of smoke, and something that can only be time. The wine moves slowly on your tongue, gentle but sure, leaving a light grip along your gums. It reminds you that today's sticky floors and aching legs are already on their way to becoming something like this, ordinary and quietly precious in someone else's evening, months from now. Conversation drifts around you in low threads. People mention which terrace surprised them, which vine tangled a basket, whose back will complain the loudest tomorrow. Laughter comes in short, soft bursts and then settles again. Plates and bowls move steadily around the table, pausing just a little longer in front of the hungriest faces without anyone saying a word. A hand reaches out now and then to refill someone else's cup before their own. No speeches, no toasts, just the simple language of passing bread, sharing salt, and making sure nobody has to reach too far. Rhythm slips into the night almost by accident. Fingers tap a gentle beat on the table, a palm marks time against a knee. Someone brings out a small drum, someone else plucks a few notes on a stringed instrument. The sound is rough at first, then finds itself. Simple harvest tunes circle the courtyard, the kind built for repetition, not performance. They roll along like the rows on the hillside, steady, predictable, kind to tired bodies. Your heel begins to keep time against the packed earth. Your shoulders sway a little without asking permission. Lantern light softens every sharp line on every face, turning grime and grape stains into shared decoration. For once, you are not watching farm life from far away. You are one of the figures inside the glow. A dish of late fruit arrives at your table. Figs, a few plums, clusters of grapes spared from the press. You choose a fig, thin skin, slightly splitting, and bite. Sweetness spreads across your tongue, thick and grainy with soft seeds. Sunlight concentrated into a small, generous answer. It tastes of all the small things you've done up there. Rearranged water channels, loosened soil, straw rings laid at thirsty roots, anxious glances at empty sky, early dew under your feet. The whole season, for a second, exists in that one mouthful. As plates empty and cups are refilled more slowly, stories stretch out. Older workers recall years when storms ruined everything just before harvest. Others remember summers so dry the vines seemed finished, only to gather themselves and survive. There are tales of wine that turned out far better than expected, and wine that stubbornly stayed ordinary despite perfect weather and perfect work. Listening, you hear the same quiet conclusion again and again. You can never control the hill, but you still show up because your effort is the only way it ever has a chance. Sitting there, with your cup resting in your loose hand, you feel something settle in your chest, heavier than air and lighter than worry. This vineyard is no longer just a place you visited inside a pretty story. It has become one of your inner places, a landscape you will carry even when you go back to alarms, screens, and buzzing messages. You know you can't stay here forever in this soft Roman night, but you also know that some part of you will always be walking these terraces, checking leaves, lifting grapes to the light, listening to the wind move along the rows. You don't declare any of this out loud. Instead, the promise sits quietly behind your breathing, that when your future days tighten like a hot, dry wind, you will remember this evening of sore muscles, bread torn under lanterns, and wine shared between people who all worked the same hill. In those moments, you will return here in your mind, step back into the rows, and let this place remind you what it feels like when work is simple, time is patient, and belonging needs no explanation at all. Later, when the music has thinned and laughter has settled into the low murmur of people too tired to keep resisting sleep, you slip quietly away from the courtyard. Your legs are heavy, your shoulders pleasantly dull with effort, and your clothes still carry the sticky ghost of grapes and dust. Lantern light falls away behind you as you step through the farmhouse gate and onto the familiar path, and the night seems to expand at once, rising up around you with that particular, generous silence that only wide open hills can make. The air is cooler out here, almost cool enough to make you shiver, but it feels good against skin still warmed by the press in the crowded room. Each breath tastes of stone, faint smoke, and the barest trace of sweetness lingering from the day's work. Under your feet the ground remembers the harvest too, patches of flattened grass where tubs rested, darker spots where spilled juice has already begun its slow conversation with the soil. The path climbs gently, your feet following it from habit rather than intention. You tell yourself you are just stretching your legs before sleep, but some quieter part of you knows you are saying goodnight. Moonlight spills over the hillside in long, pale bands, turning the terraces into stacked ribbons of silver and shadow. The vines, so detailed and fussy in daylight, now reduce themselves to clean, dark shapes, rows of gentle teeth marking the contours of the slope. The moon isn't full, but it is generous enough. Its light softens every edge, smoothing stone, leaf, and trunk into one calm pattern. You move more slowly here, partly because your feet are tired, and partly because the night seems to insist on it. Rushing would feel like shouting into a sleeping room. As you step between the rows, the ground cools further. Dew has not yet formed for the night, but yesterday's memory of it is still in your body. Those damp leaves brushing your hands, the darkened soil under your sandals, the quiet sense of rescue. You pass vines you recognize, one whose leaves curled first in the heat, now holding themselves more generously, one at the edge where the wind always arrives a little earlier, one that surprised you by carrying more fruit than its neighbors, as if trying to make up for someone else's bad year. In the moonlight, They all breathe at the same slow pace, but you carry their daytime faces in your memory. You pause at a terrace where you helped lay straw around the thirstier plants. The pale rings glow faintly, subtle halos around each trunk. They look almost ceremonial in this light, as if you spent the afternoon preparing some quiet ritual instead of just trying to keep roots from baking. It's a strangely comforting thought that even your most practical, slightly back-breaking tasks can look like offerings when the moon gets involved. The hillside does not know the difference. It only knows that somehow it made it through. Higher up, nearer the bend in the path, the little cistern sits with its dark mouth open to the sky. You approach it and look down into the still surface. The moon stares back at you from its depths, wobbled slightly by the faintest ripple of night air. Around the rim, the scars of your earlier work remain. Damp streaks of mud, finger marks where you pinched channels open or closed, tiny collapsed dams of earth and stone. The water is quiet now, the emergency rearrangement done, but you can feel the story of those dry days still pressed into the edges. You rest your fingers briefly on the cool stone, as if you're patting the hill itself on the shoulder and telling it, slightly sarcastically, that it did a decent job of not falling apart. On your way back down, you detour toward the hillside cellar. Its doorway is a deeper patch of darkness against the slope, cool air breathing out in a slow, even sigh. You don't need to step inside to know what waits there. Amphorae lined up in steady rows, press wiped and resting, the first jars of new must beginning their mysterious shift from grape to something else. Tonight you let the cellar keep its secrets. It's enough to feel the quiet promise lying underneath your feet that the day's chaos has already turned into a long, slow process that no longer needs your hands. The path bends again, and the little roadside shrine appears ahead, lifted slightly above the track like a lookout post. The clay lamp still burns in its niche, the flame smaller now but stubbornly clean. Offerings from earlier cling to the stone, a crumbling sprig, a few grains, a stain where wine soaked in and dried. You do not kneel or perform anything grand. You simply stand there, letting the lamp's light mix with the moon's, and let a single clear thought rise and drift away. Gratitude, blunt and wordless, that the vines endured, that your own restless mind found a place to rest its noise among these rows, that you were allowed to become part of this hillside story even for a short while. Below, the farmhouse glows softly, lanterns flickering through doorways. Laughter has faded into the occasional murmur. Someone moves through the courtyard, stacking, extinguishing, closing the day. Beyond the valley, other hills fold into each other under the same moon, other fields and vineyards and roads all asleep inside their own small dramas. Your hill is just one of many, but tonight it feels like the center of a gentle, quiet universe, made entirely of soil, stone, wind, and the stubborn, repeated act of care. You take one last slow walk between two rows on the middle terrace. Leaves whisper as you brush past. A stray grape cluster catches your eye, missed earlier, and you leave it there, a small gift to birds or future mornings. Your hand trails along a rough vine trunk, fingers catching on old scars where it was once pruned, guided, held. You feel your own scars answer, the invisible ones layered under your skin from other years, other worries. For a moment they seem to match, two sets of lines that say the same thing. You were cut back, and somehow you grew again. When you finally turn away from the rows, the moon rides high, steady and indifferent. Your steps down the path are slow but sure, guided more by memory than by light. Each terrace you pass releases you a little more, from the urgent heat of that dry afternoon, from the sharp focus of harvest, from the small constant hum of self-doubt you always carry. By the time you reach the farmhouse gate, The only thing left is the gentle heaviness of your body and the soft, unhurried rhythm of your breath. You slip inside, lie down on a simple bed, and feel the weight of the day pour out of your limbs and into the mattress. The smell of grapes, dust, smoke, and stone clings lightly to your skin like a faint, earthy lullaby. Outside, the vines stand under the moon, breathing slowly, leaves whispering to each other in a language of wind and sap. You let your own breathing fall into the same pace. Thoughts thin, unwind, and float away like mist over the valley. The hillside grows distant and close at the same time, shrinking down into a quiet place you can tuck inside your chest. You do not try to hold on to the images as sleep comes. They will stay without being forced. A Roman vineyard under moonlight, a gentle breeze along the terraces, soil that remembers your footprints, straw rings around thirsty roots, amphoras resting in cool darkness, a tiny flame in a stone shrine. Your body finally allowed to rest, sinking softly into the kind of sleep that feels less like escape and more like returning home. The wind down. And now, as everything grows even softer, you let the story loosen its hold and drift to the edges of your mind, the way mist slowly pulls away from the hills once the sun grows strong. The vineyard is still there, resting under its pale moon, but you no longer need to walk its paths or tend its leaves. You have done enough for one long, ancient day. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper. Notice how the muscles around your eyes relax when you stop trying to picture every terrace, every stone wall, every cluster of grapes. The details can blur. They've already done their job. What remains is only the feeling of that place, the slow rhythm of your steps between the rows, the cool breath of the cellar against your skin, the quiet weight of the basket in your hand, the kind, dry humor of realizing that for once your worries were smaller than the hill beneath your feet. Your breath flows in and out unhurried, like that thin trickle of water you guided along the channels. Inhale gently and imagine the night air on the hillside, cool, clean, faintly scented with soil and leaves, filling your lungs. Exhale slowly and let it carry away the leftover tension, like dust lifted from the path and lost into the dark. You do not have to manage anything now. No vines to check, no channels to mend, no tools to arrange. The rows are resting. The amphoras are sealed. The day is fully finished. If any thought tries to rise and claim your attention, some small leftover worry from your real life, a list of things you think you ought to do tomorrow, picture it as a single grape rolling away across the terrace. You watch it go, the way you watched the must flow into jars, and you let it disappear into the night without chasing it or judging yourself. The hillside inside you has learned to survive dry winds and long days. It can certainly survive this one extra thought without your help. Now, feel the bed beneath you like solid earth, kind and accepting. Your body is the vine, finally allowed to go quiet. Your arms and legs grow heavier, rooted in place. Your chest rises and falls at a pace that needs no supervision. Somewhere in the background, that Roman moon still shines on rows of sleeping leaves, and the breeze still wanders lazily along the terraces, but you are no longer walking there. You are resting in the dark, where all good things slowly ripen: strength, calm, the quiet courage to get through another day. Let sleep come the way dew did, silently, without fanfare, drop by drop, until everything is gently covered and deeply at peace. End of story. Sweet dreams.